Welcome to Budget Beauty, where I help you look flawless for less. Welcome back, and a very, very special welcome if you're new here. My name is Jen, and this is Budget Beauty. We do everything beauty on a budget. We talk all about empties, shopping our stash, subscription boxes, but today's a special day. Today we are talking all about my massive over 200 eyeshadow palette collection and declutter. I will be showing you all of the eyeshadow palettes in my collection, and we'll go over which ones I'm decluttering, which ones I'm keeping, and why. So if you're excited, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed and your bell notification is turned on because I upload lots and lots of new videos every single week. Check out that description box down below for my favorite subscription boxes, all of the makeup that I'm wearing in today's video if you'd like to recreate this look, and come on over, follow me on TikTok for more beauty on a budget. So let's jump in, grab a snack, grab a drink to this eyeshadow palette collection and declutter. It is time. It's time, my friends, for my eyeshadow palette collection and declutter. I have so many palettes, I don't even have room on this bookshelf. It is out of control. I also have a ton of palettes on top here, just smaller palettes, and then some on my shelf over here, as well as some on this little shelf over here. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my entire palette collection. I won't be swatching anything, but I will make sure that I show you the inside of all of the palettes. We'll be decluttering all of the palettes that I declutter. Will go to friends and family, so please don't reach out and ask me to send you the palettes. They are already spoken for, but I don't know how many palettes I have, but it's hundreds, and we need to downsize. We are coming in hot, starting with ColourPop. These are all of my ColourPop palettes. I have so many, and I know some of these are definitely going to be decluttered. Starting with the ColourPop Nightmare Before Christmas palette, I will tell you right off the bat, most of these palettes I've only used 1 or 2 times, and I have some I've never used. So I have used this palette one time and I really like it. I really like the color story. I thought it blended out really nicely. So I'm definitely keeping. Next is the Of Quartz palette. I love this cool tone palette. It is so absolutely beautiful, and I have loved every look I've created with this. I've actually used this a handful of times and I love it. Next up is the Orchid You Not palette. I actually just got this one, so I haven't even used it yet, but I have heard such good things about this that I can't wait to try it. The next palette is the Cherry Crush. I have used this palette once, and to be honest with you, the formula is nice, but I feel like all of the colors in this palette look really, really similar on the eye. I really didn't get much definition between the colors, so I'm actually going to declutter this. I'm going to give it to one of my girlfriends who has a pretty small eyeshadow palette collection, and I think that she'll have a lot of fun with this. That's Taupe is another one of my favorite cool tone palettes. You can see that I have gotten a lot of use out of this. I really truly love this palette, so it's not going anywhere. Next is It's a Mood. Now I will say that I have actually used this palette a lot. I took this palette on a trip to San Diego with me. I don't love it. I don't think it's as great as a lot of people say that it is. I mean, it's not a horrible palette, but I certainly don't love it. However, it is a very colorful and neutral mega palette, so I am going to keep it. I don't like the pressed glitters in here at all. I think the formula is horrible, but the mattes are really nice. So it's not a palette I'm ready to part with yet, but I have to say it's not all it's hyped up to be, in my opinion. The first ColourPop palette I ever bought was Fade Into Hue, and I know this palette has a bad rap. I know a lot of people hate this palette. I actually really like this palette, and when I want kind of a bright neon rainbow look, I'll reach for this, and I don't mind the pressed glitters in this palette. So despite the controversy, I am going to keep it. The Malibu Barbie palette is probably my favorite palette from ColourPop. I think the formula is amazing. The color story is beautiful. I have worn this palette quite a few times, especially in the summer. Again, one of my favorite collabs ColourPop has done as far as quality. Speaking of collabs, I did purchase the Rudolph palette that was new to ColourPop this year for the 2021 holiday. It's okay. It isn't as pigmented and vibrant as I was hoping. I really wanted that punch of red and punch of green, and I didn't get it. However, it is a palette that I like to use during the holidays, so I'm going to hang on to it. Next up is the Cabana Club palette. Now, this one I actually do really like. I've used this a handful of times, and every look that I've gotten out of it, I really liked. I love this kind of tealy blue shade up in the corner, so I'm definitely hanging on to this. My all-time favorite ColourPop palettes is the Lush Blush Life. This palette, 10 out of 10 for quality. The pigmentation, how easily these blend. I am obsessed with this palette, so it's definitely one that is staying in my collection. California Love is my favorite neutral palette from ColourPop. It's one that I've actually used quite a few times, and I don't even mind the glitter in here. Whenever I want a warm tone neutral look, this is honestly the first palette that I think about. So 4 neutral palettes, and because I don't have a whole lot of them, I'm hanging on to it. Next up is the ColourPop Tinkerbell palette. Now, I have heard such amazing things about this palette. People just rave and rave and rave about it. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike it, but the couple of times I've used it, I didn't find that the pigmentation was that great, nor did the shadows last that long. So maybe it was the eye base or something that I was using. I don't want to get rid of it, but I haven't been as impressed as others with it, but it's definitely a really pretty color story, and I love, love, love the packaging. The ColourPop Mint to Be, these were their 9-pan monochromatic palettes that they put out quite a while ago. I did buy a few of them. I like this. It's not a palette I reach for a lot, but it's the only monochromatic mint palette I have in my collection, so I'm hanging on to it. I'm glad that ColourPop mainly did away with this plastic packaging though, because I don't love it as much as the cardboard. The Limoncello palette is another one of my favorites. I just love this pop of blue in the corner. So it's a neutral palette with a pop of yellow and a pop of blue. It's a very unique color story, and it's unique to my collection, and I think that the formula is really nice as well. This is one of my favorite ColourPop palettes. And again, this is one that's a little bit controversial. Some people love it, some people don't, but this is the Disney Villains Misunderstood palette. The shimmers in here are incredible. They are so, so good. I instantly gravitate towards this palette. This is one that I've used several times, so I definitely want to keep it. The Mandalorian palette, or the Child palette, again, this is another one that just people raved about, and I didn't find it to be that great. I think I've only used it once, so I definitely need to spend a little bit more time with it. I really like the color story. I just found that they didn't last that long on the eye, so I'm definitely going to try it again, and I'm definitely going to hang on to it. Next is the High Tide palette. I really like this palette. I love this color story. My only complaint with this palette is a lot of the shades look pretty similar on the eye, so I wish that there was a little bit more definition of the shades. There's definitely more than the Cherry Crush palette, but they do look pretty similar on the eyes, but the color story is so unique, I'm going to go ahead and hang on to it. I love the Going Coconuts palette. Again, just a nice cool toned neutral palette. I don't have a lot of neutral palettes. You'll see that in my collection because I prefer color. So whenever I find a good neutral, especially cool tone palette, I want to hang on to it. The Hocus Pocus Witching Hour palette. This is the collection for Halloween of 2021. And honestly, I've never used this palette. I love the color story, but I ended up using a different palette for this year's Halloween. I'll show that to you here in a little bit. So I haven't even had a chance to try this. I do love the color story, so I'm definitely keeping it. And I definitely need to try it out. So the Mandalorian palette, which is the sister palette to that Child palette. This one I've used and I love it. It is cool toned. It is gorgeous. I love that pop of mustard yellow. I've actually used this a couple times and have been obsessed with my look. So she is definitely staying. Here's another palette I haven't even tried yet. This is the Sonic Bloom palette. The shimmers in here, I've seen videos on these and they are so nice. This was on a really good sale on Ulta, so that made me pick it up. I just haven't had a chance to try it yet, but I do love the color story, and can we just talk about how gorgeous this packaging is? I know, another palette I haven't tried yet. I just recently bought this. This is the ColourPop collab with Raw Beauty Kristi, and I wanted this palette for so long and it was discontinued, and then they brought it back, so I grabbed it. This is the At For A Sight palette. These jewel tones, these grungy colors are right up my alley. Actually, I think I'm gonna set this on my vanity and use this tomorrow because I have been obsessed with this color story since it came out. Another one of the monochromatic palettes is the Lilac You A Lot. This palette I don't love on me. The colors are pretty light. I do have a little bit darker skin tone, so I'm going to pass this on to my same girlfriend I'm passing the Cherry palette on to. She looks beautiful in purple, so I think that she will get a lot of use out of this. The Baby Got Peach palette as well, I'm going to pass that on. Again, this is just not a color story that I reach for. I do not like this pressed glitter at all. and it's just really taking up room on my very small eyeshadow palette shelf. So I'm going to pass this on to my girlfriend as well. However, the Blowing Smoke palette isn't going anywhere. I love this gray black monochromatic story for a nice smoky eye. It's beautiful, and it is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Xenon palette, and much, much more affordable. And this silver right here is literally the prettiest silver shimmer ever. The 2020 Halloween release of the Gather Round Sisters. This is a palette that I didn't purchase in 2020, but as soon as it came back in stock for Halloween 2021, I had to pick it up. I like this color story better than the 2021 Witching Hour. I have not even tried this yet, but this jewel tone grungy color story is definitely one that I'm excited about. ColourPop X Powerpuff Girls. I haven't tried this yet, but I love the color story. This shimmer blue right here looks beautiful. I love how vibrant these colors are. This is a palette that I will definitely reach for in the spring and summer, and I just had to grab it when it was on a really good sale on the ColourPop website because I just love the bright color story. And sadly, another palette I haven't used yet is the Plush Like Me. This is the 90 inspired grungy palette. I have swatched this and it's swatched beautifully. It is on my radar to use quickly because I really love the color story and I love this velvet packaging. Then I have a lot of these smaller ColourPop palettes. I haven't used this one either. This was their neon collection, which is really a neutral palette with a pop of neon. I actually got this in a subscription box. I have not tried it out yet, so I'm going to hang on to it. I also have the Too Hot palette, which is their pink monochromatic 5-pan. I don't care for this one. This is similar to the cherry one where all the colors look the same, so I'm going to declutter. This 5-pan palette I actually really like. This is their Crush palette. This is beautiful for a neutral palette, and I like this one because it's great for travel because it's just a small 5-pan, so I will hang on to this one. The Rumor Has It 5-pan palette, I do like this one. I think the quality is really good, and there's some depth and variation in the shade, so I'll hang on to it. However, I did not like they're so hard to open. This Just a Glitch palette. This one creased really, really badly on my eyes. I did only use it one time, but I like this color story a lot better than this one, so I'm going to pass this one along. Little High Society palette. I do like this one. I love a good green eyeshadow palette. You guys know this, so this one I'll hang on to. I also really, really like the Lyric palette. Again, a small, portable, neutral palette. And then also from the Neon collection, I do have the neutral with the pop of pink. Again, I haven't tried this one, but I am going to declutter this one. I'm going to give this away, and I'm going to keep the yellow one because that's more up my alley for a bright neon color. For some of the ColourPop quads, which are fantastic formula. I love their quads. This is the An Emerald Away palette. This is pretty new to ColourPop, and I love this. Every time I've used this, my looks have been gorgeous, and of course, it's that grungy green that I love. I also have Sorbet, which again is great for travel, a nice peachy neutral color story. And then I have the Free to Be palette. This is actually an all matte quad. I never reach for this. I have an all matte palette that I'm obsessed with, which I'll share with you guys later. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this one on and declutter it as well. The little Waffle Cone palette, I really like this palette. I love the variation with the greens and the browns, so I'm hanging on to it. And lastly for quads, I have The Secret Life of Scorpio, which was their astrology collection. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm hanging on to this strictly for that reason. I do really like the color story of it as well. In a subscription box, I received the Pineapple Cake Hello Kitty palette. I haven't even used this yet. However, I love, love, love yellow eyeshadow, so I'm hanging on to this because I did not buy the Honey 9-pan monochromatic yellow palette, so this one will be my yellow palette go-to. And lastly from ColourPop, I have the Cherry Sweet palette. Also, I received this in a subscription box. I have not tried it out, but since I decluttered my cherry palette, I'm going to hang on to this one. Now, the next set of palettes, I have maybe 2 or 3 from the brand. So we're going to go ahead and start with IBY. This is one of my favorite indie brands. This is the Poolside palette. I've never used this palette. I've only swatched it, but I love the colors in here. They're so pretty. This blue right here is gorgeous. I will not be departing with any of my IBY palettes because the formula is incredible. The other IBY palette I have is the Sunday Brunch. Again, I have not used this, only swatched this, but I'm definitely not decluttering it. I have a couple little palettes from Essence. I have the Dancing Green palette. I have the Dancing Green palette, and this is really good quality. I think this is a $2.99 or $3.99 palette, and actually I really like it, and I have a hard time getting rid of any green palette, so I'll hang on to it. I also have the Coral Me Maybe, and this is such good quality. I did a full face of under $10 drugstore makeup and used this palette. I'll link that video down below for you. It's great quality, and again, $2.99 or $3.99. I only have the 2 Essence palettes, so I'll hang on to both. I have a couple of Violet Voss palettes. I already decluttered the All of You Forever palette. I did not care for that one, but I do really like this Wildflower palette. It's neutral with a pop of pink, which I really like, and again, I don't have a lot of neutral palettes, and it is a really, really good formula, so I'll hang on to it. And the only other Violet Voss palette I have is the Pinky Promise palette. I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. I've had this for quite a while, and I can't tell you the last time I reached for it. I've maybe used it one time. So it's just sitting around, not getting love, and I think my girlfriend will get a lot of use out of it and actually give this palette some love. I also have a couple of palettes from the indie brand Cella. Now, this palette I got in a subscription box. I have used it. It's good quality, but it's a quad, a neutral quad that I have so many others of, so I'm going to pass this one along. But I am keeping this palette from Cella. I love this palette. I have used this a few times, and every time I've used it, I have been obsessed with my look. So I'm definitely keeping it. This blue shade right here, Chef's Kiss. So next up, we will go through Too Faced, ABH, Anastasia Beverly Hills, and Beauty Bay. So this is the newest little Too Faced palette to my collection. This one just released recently. This is the Major Love palette. And I majorly love this palette. I love the look that I came up with, and I find this palette really easy to use. And the blendability and quality of this palette is really good. I was pretty impressed. I also have the little tin packaging of Christmas coffee, and I really like this color story as well. I wore this over the holidays, and again, loved my look. Too Faced has really stepped up their quality because these two little palettes are really good. And the last Too Faced palette I have in my collection is actually the Cinnamon Swirl palette. And this palette too is excellent, excellent quality. It is neutral. It smells like a frosted cinnamon roll. I really, really have enjoyed using this palette as well. Moving on to ABH, I have the ABH Norvina. This is just the small little 9-pan palette. It actually came broken. I bought this in a BoxyCharm pop-up. I haven't even used it yet, but I do really like the color story. It's unique, it's bright, it's summery, so I'll hang on to it. I also have the Emrezy palette. This was the first ABH palette that I ever purchased, and I really, really like this palette. It's excellent quality. I love that there's fun pops of different colors in here, and every time I've used this palette, I felt inspired and was able to get some really pretty looks. I also have the original Norvina palette. I actually bought this on a big Ulta sale, and honestly, I haven't even used it yet. I loved the colors, that's why I bought it, and I'm definitely keeping it because if it's as good as the Emrezy palette, I am definitely in for a treat. And last but not least is the big ABH Norvina palette. This came in a subscription box, and I really enjoy this palette as well. I love color, I love bright colors. This is another one of my go-to summer palettes. Now on to Beauty Bay. I have the Age of Opulence palette. I actually just used this for the first time a couple of days ago, and I was completely impressed. You can see I used the blue colors. This shimmer right here is probably the prettiest tealy blue green shimmer I have ever used. Beauty Bay is such an affordable brand. I think these palettes are about $18. I can tell you right now I will not be getting rid of either of the ones that I have because they are both amazing. The other Beauty Bay palette I have is the famous, world famous Wilderness palette. Another beautiful, grungy, earthy color story. I've used this several times. I've loved my looks, and I can't wait to use it some more. Let's go ahead and dive into my Alien Cosmetics or my Unearthly Cosmetics palettes. I'll tell you right now, this is one of my all-time favorite indie brands, so I will not be decluttering any of them, but I have to show you these palettes because they're stunning. So the first palette I have is the Not Normal palette. I mean, look at this grungy color story. This is all of your grungy dreams come true. It is absolutely beautiful, and every single one of these palettes has one of my all-time favorite formulas. The Lore palette is my all-time favorite Unearthly or Alien Cosmetics palettes that I have. Everything about this palette is beautiful. This middle shade right here is the most unique, shimmery, glimmery, beautiful color. I love this palette. If I could only keep one palette in my collection, it would be this one. Now, the Fall Magic is new to my collection. I actually have not even used this palette yet, but I pretty much buy everything Alien or Unearthly releases, and I couldn't pass this one up. I saw video after video with the quality of this palette being out of this world, as usual with this brand. So this one is on my radar to use. I just recently bought this and the next one, so I haven't used either of them, but definitely not getting rid of it. This is the Poison Apple palette. This is the other one I bought along with the Fall Magic that I have not used yet. But look at this color story. Look at that pop of yellow and this mint green, and then you have these nice deep shades. Absolutely stunning. This is another one of my favorite alien or unearthly palettes. This is the In the Dark palette. Oh my gosh, this palette is beautiful. It is smoky, it is grungy, it is gothy, it is absolutely amazing. This is probably my second favorite of the unearthly palettes that I have. The Fairy Frolic palette. Look at this beautiful palette. This is also that earthy, grungy color story. Another fantastic palette. She really puts together the most beautiful colors that you wouldn't pair together, but always the looks turn out amazing. The Witching Hour palette. This was their Halloween collection for 2021. So this is actually the palette that I did my Halloween look with instead of the ColourPop one. And I love it. I love the green, the purple, and the orange. I did this tri-colored eye with it and it turned out absolutely beautiful. I threw on a black liquid lip and it was the perfect Halloween look. So I'm excited to try the ColourPop one this next year, but this one is stellar. I also truly love this palette. This is the Hauntingly Glamorous palette, and it is so pretty. You've got deep grunge, but you've also got some neon-y, pastel-y colors, and the looks that you can create with this are very unique. I don't have another palette in my collection that quite compares to this. I know I just said the Lure was the one palette I would keep, but for Alien Cosmetics or Unearthly, this is my all-time favorite palette. This is the All I Ever Wanted palette. This is an entire palette of special shades, shimmery shades, duochromes, multi-chromes. It's a pricey palette, but it is well worth it. I have used this palette so many times. Whenever I have a matte look, whenever I want a gorgeous stop you in your tracks shimmer, I reach for this palette. If you love fun special shades, definitely get the All I Ever Wanted. I also have a couple of palettes from a brand called Be Bella Cosmetics. This is a small independent or indie brand. This is the Daisy Days palette. Now I just used this the other day and I created a really pretty look. However, this palette isn't as pigmented as I want it to be. Luckily, it does build up really well, so I'm going to keep it because it is buildable and it is a nice neutral palette with a pop of color. The other Be Bella Cosmetics palette I have is the Life in Pastel palette, and this is just a really pretty pastel palette. I have another pastel palette I like better, and I don't need to because I don't reach for pastels that often, so I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to my girlfriend. I will say though, this is a great affordable pastel palette if you're in the market. And two palettes from the brand Alter Ego. Alter Ego dupes high-end brands, mainly Natasha Denona. So this is their Shadow Kiss palette, which is a dupe of the Natasha Denona Glam palette, I believe. If I'm wrong, I'll put that here on the screen. The formula is really good. Is it Natasha Denona? No, but it's a great affordable dupe. I think this palette is under $20, and I wanted a nice neutral cool tone palette in my collection, so I picked it up and I have used it several times. So if you want to save money on the high-end brands, definitely check out Alter Ego. And the other palette that I have from them is the Canyon palette, which this is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Bronze palette. This one I don't love as much as the Shadow Kiss palette. So since I have so many neutral palettes, I'm going to go ahead and give this away to my girlfriend. I know she really loves neutral eyeshadow, so she'll get a lot of use out of this. All right, let's start off with my LA Girl palettes. This is the Hey Hey Vacay, and these LA Girl palettes are such good quality and they are so affordable. Sometimes you can buy these palettes for under $10 on Ulta's website. I love the formula. It is so good for a drugstore affordable brand, so I'm definitely hanging on to this. These two colors right here are so pretty. This is the LA Girl Holly Days collection. I haven't even had a chance to use this palette. This is why I need to do this video, but I love the colors. I love that they're jewel toned and earthy, and it's such a pretty color story. So I'll be going to hang on to it since I haven't even had a chance to test it out. I also have the Hey Hey Vacay Under the Palm palette, and I truly love this palette. I've used this so many times for these green kind of grungy colors, all these pretty neutral oranges. This is a fantastic palette. This one is probably my favorite out of all of my LA Girl palettes. And last for LA Girl, I have the Main Stage Desert Dream palette. Look at this. This is beautiful. It's a very unique color story to my collection. It's neon, it's pastel. I really like this palette. Now moving on to my Natasha Denona palette. The first one I have is the 5-pan Ayana palette. This is a neutral, cool toned 5-pan palette. Natasha Denona's formula is so good. I'm keeping all of my palettes, and I do really like these ones for travel. They don't take up a lot of space, and they are such a great formula. I also have the Jubilee palette. Now this one came in a BoxyCharm, and when I first got it, I was like, that is the weirdest. Does not look like a fun color story to work with, but it's actually really pretty. And this shade right here is a navy blue. It's not a black. So I really like this, and I've been able to come up with some really pretty looks. I also have this little tiny 3-pan Biba palette. I haven't even used this yet. It came in a Sephora favorites kit. I like it. It's everything you need for a quick and simple eye look, so I'm definitely keeping it, especially for travel. And I love this palette. This is the Mini Metropolis palette. This green shimmer shade in the middle is probably my favorite green shimmer that I have, especially for a deeper, darker green. And the only midi palette I have from Natasha Denona is actually her Love palette. I got this for half off. That's the only reason I have this, but this is a beautiful palette. All the peachy, pinky, deep red tones are in here with a pop of purple. Absolutely great quality. And moving on to my Huda Beauty palette. So the first one I have is the Huda Beauty Coral Obsessions, a little 9-pan palette. I really like this palette. Every time I've used it, I've really liked how my looks turned out. So this is one I want to keep in my collection. The Wild Obsessions Jaguar palette. Again, this color story is so unique to my collection. I love the cool tones. I'm definitely hanging on to this one. This is actually the only palette I purchased from the Wild Obsession series. The Topaz Obsessions, I like this palette. It's just your basic warm tone neutral palette, but I want to hang on to it because it's small and it's portable and it's easy to take with you. And the quality of these little 6-pan palettes is okay. It's definitely not her best quality, but it's not terrible. And then I have the Caramel Brown palette. This is another one of those 9-pan palettes. This is the only one I purchased from that release as well, and I do like this one. Again, not her best quality, but definitely not terrible quality. Next is the Rose Gold Remastered palette. I really like this palette. I think I got this in a subscription box, luckily. I love that there's a black to deepen up the outer corner. I love the pinks of this palette, the magenta, so I'm definitely hanging on to it. The Rose Quartz palette. If you don't have this palette, you need this palette. This is my favorite Huda Beauty palette ever. Now the quality of this one is stellar. It is so good. The colors are unique. The textures are unique. Such a beautiful palette. Definitely add this one to your wish list. You cannot go wrong. And the Mercury Retrograde. This is probably my second favorite palette. I love the color story. I love those pretty blues and purples with some neutrals. And again, the quality of this one is so good. We have a big stack here because these are my BH Cosmetics palettes, and BH is one of my all-time favorite indie brands. So we're going to start out with the Solar Flare palette. Now this palette is mainly a kind of shimmery palette. All of the colors have a little bit of shimmer to them. There's no mattes in this palette. I like this palette, but I never reach for it. If I want an all shimmer special shade palette, I always go with the Alien Cosmetics All I Ever Wanted. My girlfriend was actually eyeing this palette on the BH Cosmetics website, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it along to her. From the travel series, I have the Party in Puerto Rico palette. This is a beautiful neutral palette. If you want some stunning oranges and pinks, you can make some really pretty sunset looks with this palette. I don't know, honestly, that I'll get rid of really any more of my BH palettes, but this one is definitely staying. From their Say It collection, I actually have a few of these palettes. They're really good. This is the Let That Shit Go palette. And here's the color story. It is so pretty. It is absolutely beautiful. I love this dark green with this shimmery green and then this more like baby poop green. The quality of these 9-pan palettes is really good. I also have this palette, and here is the color story of that one. This is a little bit more of those deep jewel tone colors. I haven't even used this yet. I got this on a great BH sale, so I grabbed it, but it's definitely on my radar to use soon. During that same sale, I grabbed the Absinthe palette. Again, I haven't used this. I literally just took the plastic off, but this is more of a monochromatic 9-pan green palette, and I love green, like I mentioned, and I've heard really good things about this, and if it's the normal BH quality, it's going to be exceptional. From the Say It collection, this is my all-time favorite palette. I've used this so many times. This is the Do Not Disturb palette, and look how pretty that color story is. Those light colors mixed with these deep colors. The looks I have gotten with this, I have received so many compliments on, and I find this palette really inspiring and easy to use. I also also purchased this one with the Absinthe palette. This is the Venom palette, and this is just a cool toned smoky palette. Again, I have not used this yet, but these colors immediately caught my eye, and I'm really excited to create a smoky look with this. Look at this. This is why I have to do this video, because I have two of this palette. This one is still in the plastic, so I must have ordered this not realizing that I already had this palette. So this is a perfect time to give this away because it is brand new and unused. This is why, kids, you don't have such a large eyeshadow palette collection. This is one of my favorite BH palettes. This is the Blueberry Muffin palette. The quality of this palette is so good. These blues, these blurples are some of the prettiest I have ever seen. Like I said, this is one of my all-time favorite BH palettes. From the travel series, I have the Passion in Paris. Out of the travel series palettes, this one's my favorite. Every look I have created with this has been so beautiful. This is another palette that whenever I use it, I get a million compliments. Next up are the Birthstone series palettes that BH did in 2021. Now, I didn't buy all the Birthstone palettes, but I did buy the ones that caught my attention, starting with the Peridot palette. I love this palette. I absolutely love this. I love that there's greens paired with yellows and reds and pinks. It's so pretty. And these little palettes were $9, and they are such good quality. This is one of my favorites of the Birthstone series. This Sapphire palette is beautiful. This shade right here is one of the prettiest shimmer shades I've ever seen from BH. I also purchased the Turquoise palette. I have not even used this one yet. I do like the color story. It's unique, it's different, and this turquoise shimmer is really pretty. And this definitely gives me turquoise vibes. The blues with the browns, that's what the stone looks like. The Diamond palette, this one I wasn't sure that I would love, but I love this. I love this black, and this shimmer is absolutely beautiful. I've created some really pretty smoky looks with this. Next up is the Garnet palette. This is probably my least favorite of the palettes in this Birthstone series, and one honestly that I never reach for. So even though these were limited edition, I am going to actually go ahead and pass this one along. The Citrine palette, this is November's Birthstone palette, which is my birthday, so of course I had to pick it up, but I also love the mustard yellow brown color combination. Again, another palette, super easy to use, really pretty looks. And lastly, for the Birthstone series, I have the Emerald palette. I really like this one. I even like this one better than the Peridot. It's just deeper and grungier. Another one of my all-time favorite palettes is the Smitten in Switzerland. This is part of their travel series as well. And this is just such a pretty palette. It is so versatile. It's so inspiring when I look at it. And of course, the quality is exceptional. The Avocado Toast palette. I love this palette. I have used this palette so many times. I actually bought this palette for my friend that I'm giving all these palettes to for Christmas. That's how much I love this palette and just rave about it every time I use it. From their Sweet Shop collection, I have a few of their big monochromatic palettes, starting with the Pistachio, which is a green palette. I have worn this palette a handful of times, and this is another one that every time I wear it, a lot of people compliment how pretty my green look is. These shimmers in the Sweet Shop palettes are the best shimmers I've ever got. Are the best shimmers BH has ever done. They are so vibrant and in your face. I love them. So I'm definitely keeping all of these, starting with the Pistachio. The Cotton Candy palette is their pinky purple monochromatic palette. This is another one that I really like, and these colors I don't have a lot in my collection, so I like that I have such great formula, such great shimmer in one palette. And lastly, from the Sweet Shop collection, I have the Bubblegum palette because I love a good blue eyeshadow. Again, the shimmers, million out of 10. And my last BH palette, this is such a great palette. This is the Mrs. Claus, the Lit List palette. This came out for holiday 2021. The shadows in this palette are so good. I mean, the shimmers are beautiful. There is one pressed glitter here in the middle, but it's actually a really good pressed glitter. This is the palette I wore on Christmas Day, and my look turned out so pretty. These are the greens and the reds that I wanted from the Rudolph palette. They are in this Lit List palette. All right, moving on to my Sydney Grace palettes. I have all three of the Sydney Grace X Temptalia palettes. I really like all of these palettes. The quality of these is so good. This is the Quintessence palette. This one's probably my favorite. I just really like the jewel tones. The shimmers in these are great. In fact, Sydney Grace has another one of my favorite formulas. The next palette is the On the Horizon palette. I really like this one as well. I'll be keeping all of my Sydney Grace palettes, but I wanted to show you these Temptalia ones. If you haven't gotten these yet, I believe that they're still available and they're really good quality. And lastly is the Radiant Reflection palette. I really like this really pretty gold color right here. And again, just such a beautiful color story. I have the Tiny Marvels palette, which is Sydney Grace's collaboration with Mel Thompson. Unfortunately, Mel Thompson did pass away in 2021. Not only do I love this palette and this color story, but this has a special place in my heart because it was a collab with her. They did bring this back, and if it's still available, the proceeds go to her family. So if you love this color story or you want to try out Sydney Grace, this would be a great palette and such a great cause as well. And lastly, from Sydney Grace is also one of my favorite palettes. This is the Enduring Love palette. I love this palette. I have enduring love for this. This is such a great palette. It's such an inspiring, fun color story. And the quality of this palette is the best from Sydney Grace. Now moving on to Blend Bunny palettes. This is a brand that I have fallen in love with. I have purchased every single one of their releases. This is the Surge palette that was released in 2021. What I like about this palette is how unique it is. You have these pastel shades, then you have some jewel tone shades, getting into some deeper, grungier shades, an entire row of shimmer that goes with every color of the mattes, and a row of neons, and these are neon. This chartreuse color Shocked right here is amazing. If you haven't picked up Blend Bunny, this is your calling to do that because it is such a great formula. I also bought the Dollhouse palette. Now I haven't even used this palette, but look at this. I mean, how beautiful is this? This is Blend Bunny's take on a neutral palette. You have 2 rows of shimmers, 3 rows of mattes, absolutely stunning. This is the palette I'm going to be putting on my eyes tomorrow because now that I opened it up and saw it, it's definitely calling my name. And this was the first palette I ever bought from them. This is their Blend Bunny Blends palette. So this is an all matte palette. So when I mentioned earlier that I had an all matte palette that I love, this is the one I was talking about. The quality of these mattes is better than most high-end mattes. Actually better than all high-end mattes I've ever tried. And it's nice to have just an all matte palette that you can pair with those special shades. This is the one I pair a lot with that Alien Cosmetics All I Ever Wanted. I'll throw a matte in my crease and then put one of those special shades on my lid. Moving on to Nomad Cosmetics. This is another indie brand that I really, really like. This is their National Parks palette, and I love this. It screams outdoors. It screams national parks, and it is really, really good quality. Their shimmers are beautiful. Their mattes blend beautifully. They're not patchy. I really like Nomad, and I will tell you that the first time I ordered from them, the company actually sent me a personalized email from the owners and creators thanking me for my order. Just a really good small indie brand. They released the Haunted Europe palette. Can you see how that shifts? Really cool. They released this around Halloween this year. Unfortunately, this is another palette I haven't had to try yet. I have no concerns about the quality because Nomad's quality is so good, and I just love the grunge of this. I love a good grungy palette. I love this palette. This is the Iceland Fire and Ice palette. I actually wore this just the other day, and my look was just so pretty with the blues and the greens. I popped this red on my lower lash line, and it just really made this unique, pretty look. Again, the quality, 10 out of 10. The newest palette to my Nomad collection is the Whistler's Lodge palette. I've already used this palette as well. Actually, I used this the day that it came in. I was that excited about it. And this is probably one of the best palettes quality-wise from Nomad. Even though all the palettes are quality, this one is like really, really good quality. All right, moving on to Ace Beauté. I have a few of their palettes. This is the Nostalgia palette, and this one I actually got in a subscription box quite a while ago, and this is their old formula. Now, recently they reformulated, and their shadows are just so much better now. They blend better. They're not patchy. So this, unfortunately, is the old formula. So I most likely will not pick this palette up to use it because I just prefer the new formula. So I'm going to declutter. However, the Falling For You palette is their new formula, and it is so good. The mattes are buttery soft. They blend like a dream. There's no patchiness. They layer really well. The old formula, you had to apply your darkest color first because it wouldn't layer over lighter colors. Now with this new formula, it just blends beautifully, and I love this fall-inspired color story. This is my favorite Ace Beauté palette. This is the Tropical Vibes. This just came out recently. This is their revised formula again. This is Green Dreams. It is so grungy, but you can also brighten it up with some of these beautiful light green shades. And then this color right here in the corner is absolutely beautiful. This is my all-time favorite palette from Ace Beauté. Now moving on to my SheGlam palettes. Now SheGlam is the makeup brand of Shein, and they actually have some really, really good quality makeup. This is their Chroma Zone palette. So this is a palette primarily made up of multi-chromes. Now I took this palette on a trip, and I will tell you that this shade right here is really, really pretty. Now the other shades in the palette are meh. They're not really that great. However, I have a lot of special shades from Unearthly that I really like, and I'm honestly not going to reach for this again. My girlfriend, I don't think has any multi-chrome shadows in her collection, so she will probably love having this added to her stash of eyeshadow palettes. I just bought this little 5-pan palette. This is the SheGlam Glam 101. I haven't even had a chance to use this palette yet, but I like the whole mustard and orange color story, and I wanted something that was neutral, that was portable, small and easy to use, easy to take with you. So I'm excited to try this out. So I'm going to hang on to it. Now I did a full face of SheGlam makeup here on my channel and I was wowed. So you guys have to check out that video. And I used this palette. This was their Halloween release. This is the Wretched Romance palette. The quality of these shadows is so good. So good. I was utterly impressed. So spoiler alert for that video, the palette was amazing. But if you want to check out the look that I created, I'll link the video down below for you, but I'm definitely keeping this. This was their astrology collection, and this is the Scorpio palette. As soon as I saw that the astrology collection was released, and I knew I loved their formula, I picked up the palette for Scorpio. Really nice palette. I mean, these mattes blend really well and the shimmers are really pretty. This palette I think was like $6 or $9. They have the entire astrology collection, so definitely check it out. I do have a couple of Wander Beauty palettes, starting with the Wanderous Rush palette. Now I received this in a subscription box and I love this palette. Every time I've used this palette, every look that I've created has turned out really nice. This is another palette that I just get a lot of compliments when I wear it. And I like how small it is. It's portable. It's easy to take with you. So I'm hanging on to it. And then I also have the Wanderous Escape palette. Now this is similar to that one, except for it does have this fun pop of teal right here. And I really like this palette as well. The looks I've gotten out of this palette have been really easy to use and have turned out really pretty. So I'm going to keep both my Wander Beauty palettes. Lastly for this batch are my Adept palettes. And this is my second favorite indie brand in the world. I will be keeping all of these. This is the Kodan palette. These shimmers are the best shimmers. They beat out any other shimmer. This is an indie brand. Not only are their shimmers amazing, but their mattes blend beautifully and are buttery soft as well. So this is a company I purchase all of their releases from and I use them all the time. So this one is the Kodan palette. I also have the Plain Jane palette. Now they just did the Plain Jane Remastered where they've changed up some of the shades and put a new formula in the shades. Now I didn't pick that up because I have the original Plain Jane and this quality is amazing. So there was no need for me to pick up the remastered, but if you want beautiful mattes and really special shades, definitely look at Adept. One of my favorite Adept palettes is the Ninhydrin. Look at these colors. Look at those purples and those blues. Again, amazing special shades, amazing formula. And this was their newest release. This is the Amet New palette. This one has some mattes in it and you can see that they're neutral mattes, which is really nice for neutral lovers, but the mattes pair so well with all of the shimmers. I love this palette. This is a palette that I can use the mattes out of with any of the shimmers and create beautiful looks. All right, so next up are my Catrice palettes. I just have a couple of them. So I have one of the Catrice 5 in a box little palettes. These are really good quality and these are really affordable. I feel like this is maybe a $5 palette. The shimmer in here is beautiful and it's a nice neutral color story. Now the Pro palette, the Neon Earth palette, I can't really say the same about. I really didn't love the formula in this palette. This is not a color story that I reach for. So I am going to declutter. Moving on to my Jaclyn Hill palettes, I have the Jaclyn Hill Armed and Dangerous palette. I've actually not used this yet. I picked this up at TJ Maxx, I want to say for like $5 or $6. I do like the neutral color story and I always wanted to have one of these Vault style palettes in my collection. This was her most recent collab with Morphe. This is her Divine Neutrals palette. I love this palette. The formula is so good. When I think about doing a neutral eye look, this is the first palette that enters my mind. It's that good. And you can get this on sale at Ulta, but I think the full retail price is only $18. I also have my OG Jaclyn Hill palettes. This is the Volume 1 palette. You can see I've gotten a lot of use out of this. I'm definitely hanging on to these. I love these. For a mega palette, if you're newly into makeup and you want a palette for everything, color, neutral, shimmer, the Jaclyn Hill palettes are really good and really good quality. And then of course I have the Volume 2 as well. Now I prefer the Volume 1. I definitely reach for that more, but if I want a more colorful pink, purple, orangey look, I'll go ahead and reach for the Volume 2. From the brand ZC Cosmetics, this is a brand out of China. I actually purchased a few palettes, one of them being this macaroon palette. I hate this palette. The colors are so light. There's hardly any pigmentation. It was really, really hard to work with, so this one I'm decluttering. Now these two palettes from ZC I haven't even tried yet, but the packaging on these is so nice. That's what drew me in. This is a collaboration with Alice in Wonderland, and this is the Off With Their Heads palette. I love these fun shades on the ends, and I've heard that the quality of this one is really good. So hopefully it's better than the macaroon. Again, I haven't tried either of the two palettes that I picked up yet. The second palette is the We're All Mad here, and I don't know if you can see, but there is some glitter that shifts around in the color on the cover, and this color story is beautiful as well. Look at these fun shades on the ends, and this glittery shimmery shade looks beautiful. And all of these come with the brush, and the packaging is really, really luxe feeling. Next are my Nabla palettes. Now I only have two, and I have two of the Nabla Cutie palettes. These actually came in a subscription box. So first I have the Analog palette. Now this is the neutral 6-pan palette. The Nabla's formula is really, really good. But for a neutral palette, this is just not one that I reach for, so I'm going to declutter. I also have the Nabla Midnight palette. Now this one I love. These shimmer shades, this one and this blue one on the end, are so pretty. Every time I've used this palette, I've just been inspired and loved my look, so this little cutie palette is staying in my collection. Moving on to my Laura Lee Los Angeles palettes, I have her Candy Skies palette. Now, when I mentioned earlier that I was getting rid of that pastel palette, this is the one that if I reach for pastels, this is the palette I'm reaching for. The formula is so good, and for pastels, these are very, very pigmented and vibrant on the eyes. I also have the Nudie Patootie Volume 1 palette. I really, really like these. These are very nude color stories, but they're so pretty. And I really like Laura Lee Los Angeles formula. And the Nudie 2 palette, of course, I had to pick that up when I fell in love with the Nudie 1 palette, and this one I love equally as much. Next are my Odin's Eye palette. Now, I just recently discovered Odin's Eye in 2021 when this collab came out with some YouTube creators, and their formula blew me away. I know that there's another collaboration coming out here shortly with another YouTuber. I'm going to pick that up. They are on my radar. I will probably be addicted to them like I am Adept and Alien Cosmetics and buy all of their releases because their quality is so good. So this is the Hummingbird palette, which was in collaboration with Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner. Oh my goodness, the quality, the shimmers, just everything about this palette is amazing, and it includes a multi-chrome. So I love this, and again, I plan on picking up a lot more Odin's Eye. And from that same collab, the Giant Wolves palette, which was in collaboration with the Fancy Face on YouTube. I love this color story as well. I mean, look at that. Just the grunge and the multi-chromes, just everything about this palette is inspiring and beautiful, and the formula is top notch. Moving on to my Juvia's Place palette. So the first one that I have is the Nubian 2. Juvia's Place doesn't mess around. They have some very, very pigmented eyeshadows, and I really like this palette. You can get a neutral look, you can get a colorful look. They have some nice deep mattes to help deepen up the look. This is probably one of my favorite Juvia's Place palettes that I have. I also have the Saharan palette. Now this one I'm not as inspired by when I look at it as I am with the Nubian 2. And there are similar colors in this palette as in the Nubian. So since I'm keeping my Nubian palette, I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. This is the newest palette to my collection from Juvia's Place. This is the I Live, I Love palette, and this came out for holiday 2021. I love this palette. I mean, how unique and pretty is this with the blues and the reds? It might look intimidating, but you can create some really stunning looks with this. My last Juvia's Place palette is the Festival, and this is one of the colorful palettes. I really like this one. Again, the shadows are really pigmented, so this is a great colorful palette. Before we jump into my Glam Light palettes, I discovered this one still on my shelf. This is the Ace Beauté Vintage Dawn palette, and this is another one that is in the old formula. Not terrible, but I forgot all about this palette, so I'm going to declutter. Now moving on to Glam Light. Glam Light is another one of my favorite indie brands. They have some of the best shimmer formulas. So the first palette up is the Dirty Martini palette. This was part of their Happy Hour collection. I love this palette. It is green, and the quality of Glam Light shimmers are one of the best. Their mattes are really good, but where they really shine is their shimmer. So Dirty Martini is definitely staying. I also have the Chocolate Martini. This was the more neutral palette in the Happy Hour collection. Absolutely beautiful beautiful neutral palette. The Viva Taco palette. I actually really like this palette. I've used this quite a few times and it's been really fun. It's just a fun, unique color story and it's the same really good Glam Light quality. I also have the Glam Light Cake palette. This is a really pretty, more pastel, bright colored color story. Really, really good quality. The only thing I don't like about Glam Light is their packaging can be kind of bulky, but it's also fun because it's all food themed, but I really, really love the cake palette. Next up is their burger palette. This is really cute packaging, really bulky packaging, but really cute. And I also really like the color story of this one. It's really fun and it really reminds me of a burger. All the different toppings that go on a burger. I actually have not even used this one yet. I bought all of these palettes in a big Glam Light bundle that they did. So I haven't had a chance to use the pizza palette yet, but look how cute this is. It is just so much fun. And this shade jalapeno, this shimmer right here looks beautiful, maybe paired with this basil. Really excited to finally get to use this. And lastly from Glam Light is their paint palette. It actually comes on the side here with a brush. Such cute packaging. Again, I haven't even used this one yet, but I really like the more bold jewel tone colors. All of these center shades are shimmers, all around the edges are mattes. It is just an 18 color rainbow palette, and if it's like Glam Light's normal formula, I'm really excited. I have some palettes from the brand Beauty Creations. This is another indie brand. These are the Murillo Twin Sisters eyeshadow palettes. I actually got both of these in a subscription box. I've used them both and the quality is so good. It literally blew me away. That's how good the quality is for these, so I'm definitely keeping them. This one is more of a colorful palette with some pinks and blues, where the other palette is leaning more towards the neutral pink side, but really, really good quality. And here is the other palette. Like I said, it's a little more neutral leaning, a little more pink leaning, but really, really good formula. And then lastly from Beauty Creations, I have the Eye Bloom palette. I'm pretty sure this also came in a subscription box. I've used this once, but honestly, I kind of forgot about it. So this one I am going to go ahead and declutter. Now we'll jump into a few one-off palettes, just that I may only have most of these. I just have one palette from the brand. Starting with this little bento box palette from Kaja. I got this in a subscription box and you guys, I was pleasantly surprised how much I liked this little stackable eyeshadow palette. I thought the quality was really, really good. And this is again, great to take for travel. From the brand Viseart, this is actually the only Viseart palette that I have. And this palette came in a subscription box. Now I've heard rave reviews about Viseart. I don't hate it, but I don't think it's that great. It's just an average formula eyeshadow palette, in my opinion. I am going to keep it though, because I do like it and I like the color story, but I've just heard such rave reviews and I didn't think it really stacked up to those reviews. From the brand Fluid, I have the Otherworldly palette. Now again, this came in a subscription box as well. I love this little palette. I have used it so many times and every time I use it, I just fall in love with my eye look. It's the only palette I have from Fluid, but it definitely put them on the map for me. This palette is from the brand Aether Beauty, and this is another one that came in a subscription box. This is a really expensive palette, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I liked the color story, but when I actually applied this to my eyes, it applies really, really nicely. I was quite surprised, and the color story is pretty unique to my collection. Next up is the Poison Ivy collab with Doodles by the Bunny and Milan Rowe. I love Doodles by the Bunny. I think she is so incredibly talented. So when she actually collaborated on a palette, I had to pick it up. Unfortunately, I haven't even tried this out yet, but I've heard that the quality is amazing. And again, this is another indie brand, Milan Rowe, that actually is now on the map for me. From the brand Ditto, this is the Venus palette. I received this palette in a subscription box as well, and I was honestly pretty excited about it. I loved the whole planets vibe, but when I used this palette, I didn't think the quality was that great. The shimmers were really, really, in my opinion, lackluster, even with a glitter glue, so I am going to declutter. Now this is just a Z palette. This contains all of my special shades from Cleona as well as Sydney Grace. These are all duochrome, multi-chromes. These are very, very expensive. Again, I like to pair this with my Blends Bunny Matte palette, so of course I'm going to keep them. So starting with Urban Decay, this is actually the only Urban Decay palette that I own, and this is the Naked Honey palette. Urban Decay to me is pretty hit and miss, and I just didn't want to invest in a palette I didn't know that I would love. However, I really like this Naked Honey palette. I love the mustard yellows and the browns. I think this palette is absolutely beautiful, and the quality of this one is really good. This palette here is from the brand Do Color. I received this palette in a subscription box, and I actually used this on 4th of July this last year, and I created a really pretty 4th of July look. However, it is extremely, extremely hard to use. The mattes are very, very patchy, and it takes a lot to build them up. It's just too much work for me, so this palette is going to be decluttered. From the brand Copycat Cosmetics, this is the Shocked palette. Now, I received this in a subscription box. I really like it. It's just a mini rainbow palette. I haven't had the opportunity to use this yet, so I definitely want to hang on to it. From Shroud Cosmetics, this is the It's Freakin' Bats palette. This is a collaboration with Batty Bean here on YouTube. I love this palette. This palette is absolutely incredible. The color story is one of the most unique to my collection, and I love, love, love how good these perform and how pretty the looks are. From the brand Formula Z, this is the Cosmic Glitz eyeshadow palette. This is another one that came in a subscription box. I haven't even had a chance to use it yet. Initially, I was like, meh, but then I swatched the two shimmers in here, and they are so pretty. So I'm hanging on to this to see if I like how it performs. From the brand Color Story, this is the Ocean Oasis palette. This is another subscription box palette. This palette is really good. Really, really good. I was pleasantly surprised on how good the quality was. This little mixed shade of white and blue is so pretty on the eyes. Definitely a go-to summer palette for me. Now, I heard about this palette all over YouTube and finally bit the bullet and bought it. It was not a cheap palette. This is from the brand Lois Cosmetics, and this is the Meet Me in the Underworld palette. This is a grungy palette. Now, sadly, I haven't even used this yet. I kind of forgot about it. That's what happens when you have so many eyeshadow palettes. So this one is going to the top of my list to use. And if you love grunge and green and you want, highly recommend checking out Lois Cosmetics. Another palette that actually came in a subscription box, this is from Lorella Cosmetics. This is another little indie brand. This is the Totally Tubular palette. Now, I have not used this yet. I actually got this in the dead of winter, which I thought was interesting. This to me screams more of a spring summer color story. So I'm hanging on to it because I've heard that Lorella Cosmetics is really good, and I definitely want to try this out once we change seasons. From the brand Okalon, this is the Youthful palette. This is another subscription box palette. This is cute. It's just your regular rainbow palette. It did not swatch the best. The Okalon brand of eyeshadow, I actually have two of their palettes. Neither of them swatched very well. And I have the Glam Light Cake palette that is a perfect rainbow palette, so I'm going to go ahead and declutter this one. I'm also going to declutter the Okalon Pineapple palette. This one actually swatched even worse than the other palette. And again, it's a rainbow palette with some pressed glitters. I'm honestly probably never going to use this. The packaging is cute, but it's awkward to store, so I'm going to declutter. From the brand Midas Cosmetics, I have the Perception palette. Now, unfortunately, Midas Cosmetics has went out of business, but if you can get your hands on this palette, definitely do. This is a beautiful, beautiful palette. It has some lighter shades, darker shades, colors, matte colors, neutrals. It is such good quality. It's always sad to see an indie brand go out of business. One of my subscribers sent this to me because I love green eyeshadow. I've never used this, and as you saw, I have a lot of green eyeshadow palettes. So this one's brand new, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass this one on to my girlfriend. From the brand Dominique Cosmetics, I have the Celestial Thunder palette. Now, this is my only Dominique Cosmetics palette. I've heard such good things about her formula. I definitely want to hang on to this. I have not had the opportunity to test this out yet. I did buy this in a boxy pop-up just recently, and because it's the only one I have from Dominique Cosmetics, I want to hang on to it. From the brand Illamasqua, this is the Unveiled palette. This also came in a subscription box. I have used this one a handful of times. It's okay. It's just not a palette that I reach for, so I am going to declutter. I'm also going to declutter this one. This is from the Beauty Crop. This is the Espresso Yourself palette. This was also a subscription box palette. I've used it. The quality is okay, but the pans are so small. It's really, really hard to work with, and it's just a neutral palette. And I don't love neutrals, as we know, and I have so many other better quality neutral palettes. I'll go ahead and pass this one on to my girlfriend since she's more of a neutral lover than I am. From the brand Cash Beauty, I have this beautiful palette here. This is the Color Trip palette. I love this palette. It is so much fun. Look at all these really fun shades. And then this entire bottom row is all liners. So these are water activated colored liners. It's just such a fun palette. You can create so many unique different looks with this, and the quality of Cash Beauty is really good. I have a couple of palettes from Ciate London. This is the bronzed palette. This one I actually received in a subscription box, and it looks very, very similar to my Huda Beauty palette. Same color story, same tones. It's good quality, I have to say, but I hung on to my Huda Beauty, so I'm going to actually declutter this one. Also from Ciate London, I have the I Am Woman What's Your Superpower palette. This one came in a subscription box. This one pleasantly surprised me. I thought the quality was really good. Now, I have only used this once, and I've honestly never reached for it again, but I don't think I'm quite ready to part ways. Now, will this make it through the next declutter? I don't know. I definitely want to give it a little bit more love before I make a decision. From the brand Desert Dolls, this was a TikTok that sucked me in. I ended up purchasing this palette. There are quite a few pressed glitters in this palette, and the pressed glitters are definitely not my favorite, but the mattes and the shimmers are pretty good. This is another palette that I could easily declutter, but I feel like I want to give it a little more love. This is another one that may not make it through the next declutter. And Estate Cosmetics, and this is the On Wednesdays palette. So this is just a cute little neutral quad. I haven't even tried this out yet, and I've been wanting to try Estate for a long time, so I'm going to hang on to this and see how I like it. From Fenty Beauty, this is one of their little snap shadows where they all kind of snap together. This is the number 6 palette. I have to say right now, I was pleasantly surprised on how good the quality is of this palette. It is so good. It definitely intrigues me into other Fenty Beauty shadows. From the brand Makeup Revolution, this is the little avocado palette. This is actually the only Makeup Revolution palette I have. And to my pleasant surprise, I really like this palette. The formula is really good. They blend really nicely, really good shimmers. So because it's my only Revolution palette, I'm hanging on to it. I also only have one Ofra Cosmetics palette, and this is the collaboration between Ofra and Leora here on YouTube. I love Leora's channel. When I first saw this palette, I was like, ooh, I don't know about that color story, but let me just tell you, I have created some fun looks with this palette. This shade here is a great inner corner, but it's also a fantastic highlighter. So I've taken this traveling a couple times because I have a highlighter and a complete eye look in one small 5-pan palette, and the formula is really good. This is a new little palette to my collection. This is from the brand Loja, and this is the Costa Rica palette. This came in a recent subscription box, and I swatched it, and it swatched so good, so beautifully. So I'm definitely excited to hang on to this and try it out. The brand Colorboard, from the brand Beauty Glaze, this is the Colorboard palette. Now this is kind of a fun little Amazon palette. It actually comes with multiple layers of shadow. So you have a green board, an orange board, a blue board, and a pinky purple board. The palette is under $15, and the quality is really good. I have gotten a ton of use out of this. This is one of my first palettes I bought when I started collecting eyeshadow palettes. I've used it a lot, but because I have so many other palettes now, I just don't reach for this one. So I'm going to pass this along to my girlfriend because it's really 4 color stories in one palette. From the brand OPV, which is a indie brand as well, I have the Spotlight palette. I love this palette. I purchased this in a BoxyCharm pop-up. The quality is really good, and this color story is beautiful and super inspiring. My only Lethal Cosmetics palette is the Lethal is Dead palette, the collaboration with Teresa is Dead here on YouTube. She's one of my favorite YouTubers. I love her. She's hilarious, and she collaborated on this palette, and this is a really unique color story. I've made some very beautiful looks with this, and what is also great about this palette is it blends really nicely. So it definitely intrigues me to try out more Lethal Cosmetics. From the brand Mira Beauty, this is another indie brand. This is the Melancholia palette. Now I bought this because it's all about mental health. It's a palette dedicated to mental health during the holidays and the winter when it just gets really hard for people. I really liked the meaning and the thought behind this palette, so I picked it up. Unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity to try it, but I think the color story is beautiful, and I'm really excited to actually give it a try. So I am, of course, hanging on to it. Now, my only Melt Cosmetics palette in my collection, because Melt is hit and miss, so I've heard, is the Millennial Pink palette. Now, I actually received this in a Melt mystery box. I've heard this palette is not very good. I have not tried it. So it's definitely staying in my collection until I can give it a good solid try, but I have heard that the quality isn't the greatest. So let's cross our fingers that I have pretty good luck with it. I actually have a couple of Tarte palettes. So I have the Glamazonian palette. This actually came in a Tarte mystery box, and I really like this palette. The colors story is really pretty. It's very easy to use, and I like that more soft glam look that I get with it. The second palette that I have from Tarte is the Leave Your Mark palette, and this one I received in a subscription box or a Tarte mystery box. I haven't tried this yet, so I'm gonna hang on to it. I'm not as excited about the color story as the last Tarte palette, but I still definitely want to try it out before I decide whether or not I want to keep it. From the brand Persona, I have the Identity 2 palette. Now this one came in a subscription box. I have used this and I love it. The quality is so good. It is so pigmented. It's so easy to work with. I definitely want to check out some more of the Persona palettes. My brand Give Me Glow, I have the Juicy Olive palette. I had to have this palette, had to have it. And you know what? I have not even used it. But this color story is so me. The grunginess, the greens, the more monochromatic greens. It is so beautiful. I definitely need to add this one to my vanity so I can use it. We're down to our last two palettes. This is from Pink Crush Cosmetics. This is the Metamorphosis palette. Another palette that I picked up that unfortunately I haven't yet to use, but I love the blues and the purples. I love a good blue eyeshadow, a purple eyeshadow, and I wanted to support the indie brand, so I'm definitely going to put this one on my radar to use quickly too. And lastly, isn't even really a palette, it's a Z palette, and this one contains all of my JD Glow shadows. So these are all multi-chrome, duochrome shadows. Now, if you are in the market to start a single multi-chrome, duochrome shadow collection, JD Glow is the most affordable, and their quality is so good. They come in nice large pans, so they last a really long time. So definitely check out JD Glow. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot my Kaleidos. This is the only palette I have from them. This is the Flower Punk palette. I love this palette. This whole grunginess on the end is amazing. I almost forgot to show you guys this, so definitely check this out if you're interested in this color story. It's excellent quality. Two more palettes I forgot. I have the Cream Soda palette from e.l.f. and then the Mint to Be palette. This is terrible quality. I just don't really reach for this, so I'm actually going to give both of these little palettes to my friend. So here's the after. So I have a method to my madness now on these two little shelves here. These are all palettes that I haven't used yet. That will inspire me to use them. I did put a couple palettes that I have used, like the Wretched Romance and the I Am Woman palette, but just because they looked nice and filled up the space. But most of these palettes I haven't used yet. I reorganized my shelf here by brand. So that's actually going to help me pick palettes a lot easier. So I have, you know, Blend Bunny, Odin's Eye, Alien Cosmetics, Beauty Bay, you get the idea, but they're all laid out by brand. And look at this, I actually have room for more palettes. Not that I need more palettes, but I have room for more palettes. And then on the top, I kind of did the same thing. These are all of my little ColourPop palettes. I have Huda Beauty in the front. I have just some Natasha Denona in my Ofra palette, my little Kaja bento box. And then over here, I have Natasha Denona, Viseart, Fenty. And then in the back, I have Essence and Makeup Revolution. So that looks so much better. And I just put my Glam Light palettes back here. I like them for aesthetics and they fit really well on this little shelf. So I feel good. I think everything looks a lot more organized and it'll be a lot easier for me to use all my palettes and find palettes. Wow, that was a lot of eyeshadow palettes. We decluttered quite a few and I feel much better about my collection. Even though I still have a really large collection, I feel like it's a little bit more curated for me, which makes my heart really happy. So if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Of course, I'd love to have you here and you'll never miss a single video. And again, check out that description box down below for my favorite subscription boxes, the makeup that I'm wearing in today's video. And of course, come on over, follow me on TikTok for more beauty on a budget. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.